Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another live session here with Raja Skogland. My name is Nada Ahmed, and I am your host for what I call the Braving Innovation podcast, where I bring inspiring investors, founders, leaders to talk about their journey and give us insight into how we can be better investors and how we can be better founders of companies. So today I have with me Raya. She was on 2 weeks ago talking about angel investing. And today we will be diving into fundraising as a startup and pick her brain on what are some of the best tips that she can give us. If you're joining us live, please feel free to ask us any questions as we go along and we'll pick them up as we go. But to begin with, let me just say a few words about Raya. Soraya is a serial entrepreneur and she helps startups optimize fundraising. She was previously the head of fintech and CEO at the accelerator, The Factory. She's an angel investor, startup advisor, and a well renowned speaker. Since 2015, she has been helping over 1,000 entrepreneurs build their network, gain knowledge, and access capital to be able to start and successfully grow their company. Raya has an MBA degree and she actually started her career in banking. However, the entrepreneurial spirit in her got a bit too impatient and she started exploring the startup world and has had many successful ventures of her own. And she's really a true inspiration for a woman who's managed to survive, not only survive, but thrive in what's often a very male dominated ecosystem. I got to know Raya a few years ago, and she's really served as a mentor and an inspiring leader for me as I have started my own entrepreneurial journey and become more familiar with what it's like for startups to fundraise and I'm on this journey, investor journey myself. So thank you for being here with us today, Raya.
Thank you, Nada, for having me. And I want to say you also, and you have been a big inspiration for me too. So thank
It's
you for that.
mutual.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I wanted to start off by, last time we spoke about angel investing and how your journey has been so far, and I think it was a great discussion. We got some really good feedback, and now we thought today we could focus a little bit around the fundraising journey of a founder. Maybe we could start with you giving us a little bit of intro on what is the fundraising journey of a startup, especially an early stage startup.
Yeah. I mean, early stage, super early stage, I would say pre-seed, when they have an idea, when they have an intention, when they have an ambition. Usually, founders would invest their own money or go to friends and family around seed stage when they start to have something in place, an MVP, something to show. Could be a website, could be a business set up already. And they started to get some validation and clients. That's the seed stage. And if they need money, maybe they would come back to friends, family, colleagues, people who know them, who trust them, and they would start reaching out and engaging with the angel investors. So that's super early stage. Later on, I would say Series A. Usually, you this is beyond the angel investor space, and you're talking to VCs or early stage VCs, and so on and so on. So that's a little bit the fundraising journey when it comes to who to talk to at which stage.
And what kind of startups do you focus on in your work? And where in that journey do you think they have the most amount of pain point or where they often go wrong?
Well, I mean, I think there are challenges all along the way when you're running a business, whether you are at a super early stage or a Series A, Series B. You just have different kind of challenges. Now, when it comes to um, can you help me? Can you repeat your question? I have the sun that
No,
is in my eye. It's blinding me.
yeah. Because startups spend a lot of time investing, right? When I meet startups, I sometimes wonder when I talk to the CEOs, like, who is actually building the product? Because they have to spend so
Yeah.
much time on fundraising, and that's why someone like you can really help them optimize that process so that they can actually focus on their core product. And where do they struggle in this
So,
process?
so I would say for the kind of startups that I work with, I can talk about that
Hmm.
because I mentioned there are challenges at every stage. So for those I work with, I see that many at seed stage, they have gone too fast. They have moved very quickly from an idea to building a product. They haven't taken time to actually talk to customers, to validate their assumptions, to make sure they're solving a problem, to make sure that they're designing the solution that customers want. So this is something I see very often where entrepreneurs are at the stage where they're looking for funding, they're looking for investors to build more technology, while maybe it's not necessary to have more technology. Maybe you should have built an MVP with useful enough or valid enough to start generating traction and cash. But again, it depends from a business to another. There are some businesses that this assumption would not work. It would not work because also I'm looking at certain kind of businesses, and this is also what entrepreneurs need to understand. Every investor is different. Most of us, of course, we agree on what we're looking for. We're looking for a great team, product market fit, traction with good advisors, partners, an email list, a growing user base, good clients, big names, things like that. We agree on certain metrics, but however, we are looking for different kind of companies depending on our industry, on our expertise, on our network, on what we enjoy the most. So in my case, I look at B2B SaaS companies because they are scalable, because B2B, even if it's hard to sell, once you have started selling, it's a high ticket and usually recurring revenue. So B2B SaaS, I look at Nordic companies because I want founders I know. I want to be able to do a due diligence easily on them. I want to check who's in the team, who's on their board. I want to be able to know, oh, I'm connected to one of their advisors, or I know someone who knows them. So founders should keep in mind, should maybe learn about investing, and they would be in a position of investors and how investors do a due diligence and what they're looking for. Because they sometimes have unrealistic expectations where I get pitch decks from on the other side of the planet. They're like, this is a great opportunity. It's not about the opportunity. There are tons of opportunities all the time. Businesses making money are out there everywhere. So I'm not just there for the money. Of course, we want a return on investment. We want ideally 10x, 100x, ideally. 5x, 4x is a good one. It's not a successful one. So businesses that are doing great and that are making money or will potentially make money, we can find them. It's still risky. We know it's very risky. The high rate of failure, we all know about it. So how can we minimize the risk? We're looking to minimize our risks by investing in what we know, industries where we have a network, in companies that have already shown traction, have validation, clients, strong partners believing in them. It could be teaming up with a big bank, with DNB. It could be having as an auditor a big company that is because they're in fintech, for example. So we're looking for this credibility, this validation, and we're looking angel investors. I'm talking about angel investors here at the stage where you are pre-seed, seed, where it's very risky. We're looking for companies that we understand and ideally in our market personally. And I meet more and more investors like that. And the investors I co-invest with, because I have a group of seven, sometimes it varies from 7 to 9, I co-invest with. We're looking for B2B SaaS Nordic companies, ideally Norway, even if it's very limiting, right? But
Mm,
we like it when we find a Norwegian company that
mm,
has this B2B traction clients, because we're like, oh, actually, I can fly to Bergen, or I know someone who knows them. The ecosystem is so small. So
Right.
for founders, I think it's important for them to understand psychology of investors, what investors are looking for, so they can target the right investors. Don't go look for an investor who's on the other side of the planet where you are at a super early stage. Look at your local ecosystem, at the players already out there interested in your market.
Yeah, because what you're saying is that because you, as a founder, you also have limited time, right? So how the best way to optimize is, instead of casting a wide net, because I've seen founders who have an Excel spreadsheet of 100 investors that they have to get through. Try to prioritize based on their individual motivations, right? Do some research,
Exactly.
understand these, especially if you're targeting angel investors, what their motivations are. And a basic thing like geography, sometimes we underestimate that. But someone who is either from that country or currently lives in that country, they're a lot more invested in investing in startups from that region, because they can have that interaction. And even for the investors, it's not just about money, right? It's that, okay,
Yeah,
what other value I can add other than money. And I think
exactly.
sometimes we forget that.
Exactly. It's also a lifestyle. We like angel investors like to support startups, to be able to follow their journey, to be able to meet them, do a workshop, open their own network. Um, I mean, there's some I'm very close to them. I go on holidays with them. I'm invited to their birthday party, to whatever, because that's also something that we're looking for. We want to be part of the journey of a founder and be a resource, not only in
Mm,
terms of money, but in terms of network, industry, and supporting them as much as possible. So when I advise founders, I also you mentioned profiling, targeting investors. I advise them to look at the industry, investors who are from the same industry or have invested in their industry, looking at the network, looking at the geography. It's not always the case, but you increase your chances by looking at local investors or in your area, in the Nordics, for example. Uh, I would also look at if they have done similar investments in the past.
mhm,
That's super important because
mhm,
then they're familiar with the space. They understand the business model. They understand the challenges.
mhm,
They invest more in B2B. It will be hard to sell them B2C
mhm.
because they already show you that they are into B2B. There are
Right,
so many opportunities in other business models. So why aren't they doing it already, right?
right.
So looking at the business model, looking at the stage, what kind of company, at which stage do they get in? Looking
Right.
also if they have done investments recently.
Yeah. And size of
Maybe,
yeah. Mm,
yeah, uh, wondering, looking at their financial capacity. Can they
mm,
reinvest? Or if they cannot reinvest, do they have a network of investors they can bring? So do not only look for money.
mm,
uh, Only looking for money can be risky because then you're not paying attention to the personality. You're
mm,
not paying attention at the personality, at the chemistry with the investor. Be careful who you're getting into bed with. Some investors are not nice to have as investors, even if they have only 0.5% of your company. Since
yeah.
they're part of your company, they would come in and say, so what about the numbers? When am I going to get my money back? When is this? When is this? So be careful. Do not just accept money because you need money. Make sure
Mm,
there is chemistry. Make sure they understand the entrepreneur journey, that money return on investment is going to come maybe in 10 years.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
these are a few elements.
No, I think that's a really good summary of where to get started, right? If you're a startup looking for angel investment, make a list of these categories and find out do your research, basically, understand them.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, it's about building a connection, getting to know this person, and really envisioning, is this someone you would like to be part of your journey for the next 5,
Yeah.
10 years, right? If your startup is going to survive for that long, this person is going to be part of that journey.
Yeah. I can
Yeah.
tell you that I at least know three founders at least who told me that they regretted giving equity to some of their angels because looking back, they say I could have sold more products. I could have figured out how my without getting 50,000 NOK, which is 5,000 euro approximately. Looking back, they see that there is a lot of value in their equity that they gave away too easily, and now they're trying to get rid of these little investors. And myself, I have invested in a company in the US with some other angels, and we did bring an interesting amount of money to this company, but now 5 years later they don't want us anymore because they feel, but it's not fair for us as angels because we were there when they had nothing, right? But they feel like they were not so useful on the other side of the planet for them, you see.
And what happens in that scenario? Are you able to then sell your equity?
No, they have a lawyer, we have a lawyer. There we go.
So you're just still figuring it out what happens.
Exactly. It's been a few years now that everything is in standby. We have an agreement and it's not in place. So it's a convertible loan. And
So that's a word of caution for investors out there, especially when you're investing away from your geography. You should be aware.
So that's why I don't. Yeah, that's why I don't invest anymore in the US. I don't invest outside the Nordics. I'm very careful about that.
And in terms of, do you think there's a difference between when you're then moving from angel investing and now you need some more serious funding, and maybe need to go to some institutional investors? How does your journey then changes then? What do you advise startups on how they need to change their mindset from going from an angel to maybe a fund?
To maybe VC, to VCs and VC fund. It's a different ball game. Angels, family and friends, they would basically want to support you. They don't really understand what you're doing. You tell them you're going to become a unicorn. You're like, yeah, of course. We just want to help you. Okay. Angels, it's a little bit more professional. They have expectations, depending on what kind of angel as well. If some are doing it professionally or some are just learning, a different expectation. Now, when you're talking to early stage VCs or VCs, here you have to have some numbers in place. You need to have recurring revenue. You need to be on top of your cost. You need to know what's your burn rate, what's your churn. You need to know what's your cost acquisition, your CAC. There are a few elements you need to have in place before talking to them. Even I see some startups who talk to who approach investors. So, okay, here's something. I meet startups who come to me and say, yeah, so we're already in touch with VCs. And I'm like, okay, so first of all, not impressive because anybody can be in touch with VCs, okay? But they think it's a validation that they're talking to VCs. No, venture capitalists will take time to talk to you, okay? Because they never know what your company can become. So they can grab a coffee with you. They can tell you, yes, they will always tell you, or most of the time, it's interesting. Come back later. You're too early. Most of the time, when you're too early, they will tell you that. They will tell you it's interesting and come back later because it doesn't cost them anything.
Yes.
Right? At an early stage. So at an early stage, I've seen many startups who come and say, we're talking to VC. I'm like, that's not validation. That's not making me want to. I can talk to a VC tomorrow myself. And
because an idea. Yeah, absolutely.
And VCs are not looking for early stage startups who just started to get some users. They're looking for an even more solid case than angels are looking for. They're looking for something that can scale, that has the right foundation, that they're looking for something that does not have to prove really a business model anymore, or that there is a product market fit. The product market fit is there. Now they want you to scale with their money. That's how they will help you. So a bit pointless for seed.
Yeah.
But again, there are some different definitions based on what is exactly seed.
Exactly. Yeah, and that changes all the time, and it changes from where you are. And so I guess what I'm understanding is, of course, when you eventually go to a venture capital fund, you are expected to be a bit more mature than when you went to angels. So you need more hard data because VC firms are going to make their decisions on the data. how much do you think, you know, VC firms and angel investors make their decisions off of this data versus their personal opinions or the intuition? Because we've spoken about this too. Sometimes you're like, sometimes I just know right away I'm going to invest in this company.
Yeah.
And all of that have that feeling because we either immediately connect to the founder. What do you see happening, and is that changing now, especially in this new climate that we're entering?
I think that there's a combination between data and intuition and gut feeling, and I think that all of us are using that. Even if there is a great company, whether it's me as an angel or a venture capitalist, if it's a great company but we don't have chemistry, or we feel something is, you just can't explain it. For example, sometimes I heard pitching some founders who, when you start to give them feedback, they're on the defensive. They can't take feedback. They're not coachable. So even if the business is good, you're like, what kind of relationship am I going to have with them? When I share my feedback and they respond this way, I'm not interested. So how will you say that to the founder? I can say that, maybe outside that session, but I wonder if most investors would take time to give that kind of feedback. They would just say, no, not interested. But behind the doors, they would say, look, so arrogant. This founder is so arrogant. This founder is this and this and this, even if the business case is good. So I would say it's about a combination of we're human beings in the end. So we will look at the data, but also what do we think about this founder? Is she or he likable? How are they selling to people? Are they nice to talk to? How do they engage with customers?
Right. Exactly. So there's that human element which you can't quantify in a data,
Exactly.
right? So you can have all the data in the world that is pointing to the right direction, but
We
often the
try.
intuitive feelings that you have about that person also
Yeah.
going to you take into account in your decision.
When we were evaluating, when I was, because they're still doing that, when I was at the factory and evaluating companies, we had different metrics we were rating, and one of them was chemistry. Do we get along with them? So we were rating that, and it had an impact on the valuation of the company. And sometimes we had some founders that we really liked the concept, but the founder was not really, we didn't have a connection. So it was a pass. So I think at least at the factory, we had, and they still have that tool that they're using. And I'm sure that other companies are using similar tools.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's super interesting that you take the chemistry into account in terms of evaluation forecasting, because obviously if the chemistry is right, the influence you're going to have on the company will be a lot more positive, and it's going to impact the success of the company.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that in most of the matrices that I see. I mean, of course, they take into account the team, right, and the founder. But the founder can also have a really good CV, but their attitude or the
Yeah.
way that you
Yeah.
get along, you might be just completely on the different side of the spectrum.
I'm thinking about a case here where a few months ago, a founder reached out, had fundraising, and some other investors I know were investing in them. And because I'm going to say it, I follow that founder on social media, and maybe the other investors don't. But I could just see a lifestyle that I didn't want to support. And I could see, you just have access on social media, on Instagram, you have access to the family life, how they travel, the values they have.
Right.
These founders, what kind of values, how do they brag? Do they brag or not? What do they say to their followers? So I've been following that founder for a long time. Because part of the ecosystem, I follow people and they follow me. And when he reached out, I heard that other investors invested in him, and I was like, I will not support that. And and actually, this company is not doing well now. And I think it's because of the personality of the founder, honestly, because the business case is there. They managed to get traction, but there are some elements in the personality that were for me red flags, and now we can see that the company culture is not right.
Right.
And now people are leaving the company, and they're not. They don't want to work with that individual.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I mean that's super important. And we still see people who don't have great personality still get great funding, but in the long run, it's not sustainable, right? And it's just, as an investor, being aware of that. But how do you see now in the current climate? We've been in this recession now for a few months. There's still a lot of uncertainty, particularly in Europe, with regards to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. The interest rates are going to keep on rising. How have you seen the dynamics change? What do you kind of pick up on the energy of the founders, and has fundraising become a lot harder?
I think that we are becoming, of course, more demanding as investors. There are many companies fundraising, so founders need to keep in mind that they're competing with other companies fundraising as well. They're competing for the attention, they're competing for the money of the investors. And with that, we're starting to compare the opportunities. So now the best opportunity I have, it's a company that launched in June and already made 500,000 euros. For example, this is amazing. This is very rare. When every company that I meet, since that became my new benchmark, right?
Yeah,
if they haven't made 500,000 euro for the last 6 months, I'm like, no, look at this one. And of course, different business model and so on. But me, as an investor, I look at what's going to be my return on investment. So why would I invest in something? Of course, we look at different elements, but this is
the foundation.
the level. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the minimum level, you're not a charity, right? So at a minimum level, you should be able to make back your money, and not just make back your money, but a good return, because you could invest that money somewhere else.
Exactly.
But of course, there are other factors of why you would want to fund a project, is because it supports your values. It's good for the society and things like that. And do you think COVID has also changed the way that companies fundraise, in terms of what strategies they use? They have different tools that are available to them now.
Yeah, good question. I mean, this last year, I've been approached a lot online by companies I don't know. And they've been using LinkedIn. So all the companies I reviewed, or I've been reviewing right now, and I invested in one in May, approached me on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So you actually review these companies that kind of cold message you on LinkedIn?
I do if they match, if it's a match. So the match is Nordic B2B SaaS post revenue. If we have that, I ask for a pitch deck. I look at the pitch deck to make sure they actually are Nordic B2B SaaS and so on, and then we take a call.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long is your first call with them?
We're gonna keep it to 30 minutes, just to assess the chemistry, the pitch. And since we're many investors in my network, then I decide the next meeting to bring another investor, and we evaluate them together. And after that, we make different decisions. Either we don't understand the industry, which happens, so we bring another investor from another network, or we get all together with the other investors and we evaluate the case. So it's between 3 to 5 meetings before making a decision. Between each meeting, we ask for more documentation, access to the data room, maybe recorded demo of the product. So this is how it goes. And it's a little bit different from a company to another, because some give us access to everything from the beginning, and some you really have to coach them also in the fundraising, telling them, okay, actually you should, when some of them I really like, I advise them in fundraising. I tell them, okay, so maybe you should have in place this and this and this, to make it easier for us to evaluate you, but also for make it easier for you to have a good dialogue with other investors.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, cold calling on LinkedIn works then, at the end of the day? Because I've also, since I've put investor on my LinkedIn profile, I get a lot of these cold, messages, and and you get so many of them, and I think you've kind of mentioned that too, right? Like, how do you actually keep track of that? And for founders to know that actually, yeah, it works, because investors will look at it, and sometimes they won't because they'll be too busy or they got too many messages that day. But follow up. And I think you shared on your LinkedIn a really good template of what's a good way to send that cold, message on LinkedIn. What kind of information should you have there? So if you haven't checked that out, go to Raya's LinkedIn, and you can see that. So I have Amir Kader here, who's been joining, and he's saying, figuring out the dynamics of working with the right investors is an art too, and same goes for founders. So I think at the end of the day, the most important point of this conversation is, it's a two-way street. And sometimes the investors feel like they have a power dynamics, but for the really good companies that you want to invest in, you will see, and I think you might have mentioned this in your last, in our last live, is that the really good deals will be the really hard deals to get into.
Yeah.
Then the power dynamics can easily switch.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There are two companies that I'm chasing. They're not getting back to me. They don't need me. So you see, and these are the ones I know. I want. I know them, and I want. But
Right.
I also have my pride at some point. So I begged in the past the company to invest in them, and it works with shoes. I begged some others, like, really, I'm like, guys, really, come on, I already invested in you, or I know you, I helped you, advised you, let me in. And they're like, Raya, oversubscribed. We had a general assembly, we closed. And I'm like, come on, So the good ones, yeah, you beg them, you follow them, you chase them.
And then from an investor perspective, then you have to also be really clear, what are you bringing in, right? And make sure that you have that message clearly stated. So when these companies, they reach out to you, the good companies are able to find you, right? And that's why, some people still, have that old school thinking that, they undervalue the power of branding and personal branding. And for people to know, what are you really selling, Raya, as an individual? Why do I want you on my cap table? So when you're faced with such a company where you actually have to fight to be on the cap table, what do you tell them? Why should they have?
I'm your friend. Get me in. That I tried that one. It works sometimes, doesn't always work. Otherwise, yeah, you come in with a network. Usually, they're interested in the network. They're interested in getting advice, support along the way. So that can work.
Yeah, and I think I've heard that actually several times. Is really the power of the network. And a lot of this other angel and network group that I got exposure to, that's what they mostly do, other than, of course, put in the money, is make introductions and really open up their network. And the value of that, especially for a B2B company and within the SaaS space, being able to make those introductions with the right people at the right company, and actually have a real opportunity of selling your product, is very, very valuable.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
Good. So as some closing remarks, I thought maybe you could give us, your best tips. Maybe you could talk about some of the pitfalls. Where do most of founders fail when they're fundraising? I think you've shared some really fun stories previously, so maybe you could share one of them with us.
Well, I would say some of the pitfalls is not profiling investors, just shooting in all directions and expecting them to be interested in you because you're a good company. You're building something global, the next unicorn. You're disrupting the market and doing this and this, and you should just join. Like, they need to be aware that, like, there's so many opportunities like them and probably better than them. And as investors, we are exposed to all these opportunities. So profile the investor and understand the investor psychology. What are investors looking for? They're human beings. So would you invest in a company that come to you from the other side of the planet, for example, would you invest in such a company? What would you want to see in a company? Really be very, I advise entrepreneurs to be very critical with their company and their business opportunity. They are the first investors in their company, but they forget that. They believe in the idea, they're so driven, they become addicted to their vision, and they forget about doing their numbers, about validating the problem, about talking to their customers. So many do not want to talk to their customers. How are you going to build the right solution if you fear talking to your customers, if you are annoyed, or if you find it boring because you just prefer to build technology?
Exactly.
So, so profile your investor, understand the investor psychology, what they're looking for, what they're not looking for. Would they invest in something in a company like yours? Why would they invest? And build your network. Build your network. Get to know them. Build your brand. You mentioned personal branding.
Yeah.
It's so important nowadays.
It is absolutely, because everyone's building their brand, right? And if you don't, so people are going to be like, well, who are you? And if you already have a brand, the brand speaks for it. It saves you a lot of time. So I have David here. He has a question, or he's kind of commenting on what we said about geography, and he wondered about certain types of investors being attractive by their ability to help introduce our company in their regions. So if you want to enter a new market in a different region, then it might be a good idea to approach investors in that region. Have you experienced that?
I had that, but again, I cannot generalize, and it's different from a person to another. You will have some investors / consultants who would do that as a service. What's in it for them? That's the question. Why would they help you? Can they get rewarded? Can they get paid? Why would they do that? Why would they take time to introduce you to a region, to a new market? Maybe as a service. Yes, they can do that if they're rewarded for their time and their network. I had cases where some companies tell me, I had that lately, telling me, we are based in the US and we would like to enter the Nordic market. Okay, sorry. I told them, listen, I don't invest in the US, I only invest in the Nordic. They said, well, we are considering entering the Nordic market. I said, well, when you come here, then I will do my due diligence on you and I will consider maybe investing in you. And he was very pushy and told me, why don't you just start doing the due diligence? You invest and we will come. I'm like, come on, seriously? Like, I'm not going to do that. Come here. I told you I invest. There is no negotiation here. I told you I have an investment mandate. We only invest, we're very specific. We only invest in Nordic countries, exceptionally maybe European, because we've done some exceptions. Yeah. Now, if you're not already here, no, because it goes against our values. We want to be close to the founders. We want to do due diligence on you via the network. We want actually to know who knows Nada. Okay, I'm going to Google Nada. I'm going to check if I have any connections with Nada. Oh, Nada and we know Maria. I'm going to call Maria and know how is Nada doing? How is she as a person, as an individual? So how can I do that when the guy is based in, New York?
Exactly. You need an existing relationship, and you need to really get to know the company. So I know a lot of companies, based out of the Nordics and Europe, they want access, for example, to a bigger market, which would be the US, right? And there you need a strategy on how you're going to approach these investors, because just like you're averse to foreign companies. The same for investors over there. I mean, I tried to introduce some companies to American investors, and it was kind of a similar response that we don't invest outside the US. And so if you're really serious about entering the US, you can incorporate yourself in the US, and that might make it easier.
Exactly.
Unless you have a really good network already there, and you can approach some good investors who are willing to do that due diligence, who know people in your region, who know that industry really well, and really can see how themselves as being that door opener for you.
Exactly. As you said, unless you know investors who already know you very well and can vet you and open their network. Otherwise, if they don't know you, it's a risk.
It's very hard.
it's a risk
It's
for
very
them.
hard, especially when you're entering a very competitive market like the US, right? Because US is known to produce the most amount of unicorns in the world, and we're trying to disrupt that here in Europe. But it is a very competitive market for a founder, basically, when they are fundraising in the US.
Totally.
Mm.
Here
Good.
we are.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much for joining us again today, Raya. Thank you all who have joined us live and for your comments and questions. It was, again, a wonderful discussion. Always happy to have you here, Raya. And feel free to message her with any questions that you have. You can either message on this event if you're going to watch the recording, or you can message her directly.
Yes,
Thank
I help
you.
startups fundraise. I advise them on fundraising, so feel free to reach out to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she will help solve all your fundraising problems. So contact her. Okay.
Thank you for
Bye.
having me. Bye.